We'll see. We'll see who we get. Well, it's 10:30. Well, it's 10:29. It's going to be 10:30 pretty soon. It's now 10:30, according to my notes and calculations. And that means it's time for Brainstorming the Human Connection that's brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council. My name is Lawrence Diggs. I will be your host today, and we will be talking about motivation. So I hope you will be ready to get motivated. I would like to remind you that this is an interactive program. That is to say that it happens because you happen. You know, we look for your participation. We appreciate any kind of comments and contributions you may have to the conversation. My guest today is VJ Smith, and he is a motivational speaker. And we'll be talking about his work and the things that he's discovered as a result of the time that he's spent motivating people, which has been quite a while. Welcome, VJ.
Nice to be here.
Let's start off with getting a little background on you. Tell us where you're born and how did you end up in motivational speaking?
Well, and I appreciate I have to laugh, and I'm often introduced as a motivational speaker. First of all, I don't live in a van down by the river. And
okay. What?
Yeah, I appreciate the use of the word, but as I tell audiences, the only one I can motivate is me. Just like the only person who can truly motivate you is you. It's an individual decision based on your emotions or whatever. But getting back to where I come from, I was born in the town of Eureka, South Dakota, and I come from a family of, I have 3 brothers and 4 sisters. My father was an attorney in Eureka, and my mother was a graduate of the University of South Dakota. She was a teacher, but the only thing she had a chance to teach happened to be her children because there were so many of us. And so graduated in high school in 1973, came to South Dakota State University, got a degree from SDHC in 1978. Some things happened in the meantime. I ended up in Kansas City for 10 years. And in November of 1990, I returned to South Dakota State University, became the assistant athletic director for the Jackrabbit athletic program, which was really funny because I was not an athlete. But I was in the business of raising money, and that's the new lifeblood for college athletics. And so I did that for 6 years. In 1996, I took the job as the executive director for the South Dakota State University Alumni Association, which was really a thrill. I went from being around young people all the time, and which is the great thing about a college campus. You're around young people all the time. There's a certain amount of energy there. And then I shifted my focus for the next 10 years to becoming that alumni director, where the age, you went from dealing with 19-year-olds, all of a sudden it was 75 years. And there was a shift. But then what happened was, when I was in Kansas City in 1988, I'm backing up here a little bit, I joined a group called Toastmasters International. And the purpose for Toastmasters International is to improve your communication skills. And a lot of people think it's just talking. No, there's a component there about listening and listening to what is said, and try to incorporate in the way you do things. And in 1989, I found out they had contests and you could win trophies. And I thought it'd be nice to win trophies. And so every year they do an annual event called the World Championship of Public Speaking. And I tried in 89 and tried in 90, 91. I would get past the first level, maybe the second level, and get sent back down and say, you're not ready yet. My ultimate goal was to get to the finals, where you start out with 25, 30,000 contestants, you whittle it down to 9. And when you're in the finals, you're standing on a stage in front of 2,500 people, and they're watching you on the big screens, and it's a very frightening moment. So, but in 1994, I got to the finals in Louisville, Kentucky. Didn't win anything. It was a tremendous experience. And I committed myself to try to go back, and I took a year off, and then 1996, I got to go back. And this time the finals happened to be in St. Louis, and I didn't win anything again, but yet I did win something. I got more out of losing than I ever would about winning. And it's the truth, because it makes you hungry. And there was enough exposure there. And I'm going to take you on a side trip here for a moment. In 1994, there was a guy by the name of Dr. Morgan McCarthy who won the world championship. And everyone in that huge ballroom knew when Morgan was done, he was the champ. All the contestants knew it. He just had that audience in his hand. And I saw him later in the day. He was in the lobby of the hotel, and he had all these adoring fans around him. And frankly, I wanted his trophy. I wanted his adoring fans. I wanted all the stuff. I became very envious. So as it turned out, Morgan left the business of being a veterinarian, and he got tired of pulling calves in March. And I could understand that. And he wanted to get into the world of public speaking. About 8-9 years ago, I met Morgan in Milwaukee. I was there to speak at a banking convention, and we had breakfast. And it was so sad because it hadn't worked out for him. And I could see the disappointment on his face. And I knew where I had been as an also ran. I wanted to find out where the champ went to. And it didn't work out for him, and he's back to pulling calves again. And I'm just so sad. Well, ironically, 2 years later, I'm back in Louisville and speaking in the room that I saw Morgan win the world championship. And so I sent a picture to Morgan of that room. And I said, champ, I'm at the site of your greatest victory. And he sent an email back to me that has stuck with me. And he said, I got the trophy, but you won the prize. And I'm mindful of the fact that I'm able to do something that I'm fortunate to be able to do, because there are a lot of people who would like to be able to do this for a career. It's something that I never imagined long ago, but here it is, and grateful every day for that I get to do this. It's just, I find it very, very weird that I talk and people pay me money. So anyway, that's what I do.
Yeah, well, I think there's hope in that business. You know, I hear it. How they say, I hear it pays well. You know, let's talk about your books. Or I know you have one book, or do you have more?
I've written a total of 3 books, and so, but. And so for some of your listeners, because I see some of the names that come across, and I'm familiar with some of those people. A lot of people, and this was the game changer for me, and it all happened totally by accident. And it goes back to my public speaking. Back in the mid to late 90s, I started doing a speech called "Simple Choices, Big Rewards," and one piece of that happened to be the importance of gratitude in people's lives, expressing gratitude constantly, appreciating the people around us, the people that we live with, the people that we work with. And I started talking about this little guy that ran a cash register at Walmart by the name of Marty here in Brookings. And I noticed when I would bring up his name and how he would operate, people in the audience were smiling, because a lot of them had seen what I saw. And so I wrote a letter to the CEO of Walmart, the chief executive officer in Bentonville, Arkansas. And I said, you got a superstar in Brookings, and you ought to know about it, because everyone wants to be in his line. I sent the letter, and that's all I wanted. And it was part of this idea of expressing gratitude. And the best gratitude happens to be from people who see you. You don't know them, but all of a sudden, wow. So I sent a letter. That letter came back with chain of command. Because one day I was in Marty's line, and I wrote a check and had my name on that check, and he looked at that name, because they read the letter to Marty in front of all the employees,
Mm.
associates, they like to call them. And he came around the counter and he's staring at me, and I'm looking down at him. I don't know what's coming next, but he throws his arms around me and he buries his head in my chest and he said, "I don't know who you are, but thanks for doing that." And I threw my arms around him, just a couple of guys hugging at Walmart. And we became
I hear that happens often at Walmart.
could be, but and we became great friends. And I would go over to his house, which happened to be a trailer home, every couple of weeks. He was part of that World War II generation, and I couldn't get enough of him. And so for the next 14 months, I would write things down, and then a year later, I started giving a talk called "The Richest Man in Town," and the appeal, it was extraordinary, especially when I would take him with me, because a lot of people believed he wasn't real. I was painting the picture that was not real.
Right.
So I would take him with me, but we had this deal. He couldn't sit in front of me when I would talk because he'd start crying because he couldn't believe that someone was standing on the stage talking about his life. And so I made him sit off on the sides, and anyway, I'd introduce him at the end, and there's always a standing ovation. I'd simply walk off the stage, have him come up on stage. People would be clapping for him. I'd walk off the stage, and it was really something to look back and see that man on the stage getting the accolades. Well, he died in April of 2004, and a year later, a book came out, and I know some of the people here have seen this book. And this is the original cover of the book. It was self-published. Bought 1,000 copies of this book from a publisher that no longer exists in Sioux Falls, and they were gone in 3 weeks. And so we ordered 2,000. They were gone in 2 weeks, and this thing started happening. And we went through 10 printings, and at the end, the last 5 printings, having 5,000 at a time coming, and sold 27,000 copies of the book in this format, which was really amazing. You know, it was all word of mouth. There wasn't this social media frenzy like there is now. And then I got a phone call from a book publisher in Illinois, and he said, "I want to take Marty to the world." And so for 8 years, this company called Simple Truths had possession of the book. And then about 7, 8 years ago, we negotiated and got it back, and the book now looks like this. And frankly, Lawrence, it's the reason why I get to do what I get to do, because a lot of people will read the book, and the next thing I know, I'm on an airplane or in my car going somewhere, and it's just wild.
Well, that's a great story to hear, and I'm hoping that our audience and our panel here will not only take that in, but to see that you created something basically out of your head, you know, just like, you know, like your imagination, what you wanted to do, you found a way to create. So you're, in a sense, you are an example of the things that you talk about. Let's talk about what it means to be in the position of talking to people and encouraging them. Where do you get the motivation to, you know, to get up and to actually create something that you feel that will help others to be their better selves?
I appreciate the question. If anybody heard my talk about Marty that I started giving in March of 2001, it doesn't resemble itself. And the reason why is because so many people have approached me after I speak, or have written me letters or sent me emails and shared their stories, similar stories, stories where people's gratitude changed their lives. And I'm able to incorporate many of their stories into the Marty story now. 45 minutes of my talk in say 2002, 45 minutes of my talk is about Marty. But now it's probably down to 20 minutes because there's so many other stories that get involved. And one of the things that I didn't realize as I had been putting this all together was that I don't speak to a certain audience, but I speak to everybody. It isn't like that I have been positioned to speak to just bankers or to medical people or whatever. I get to give the same message to a group of doctors in San Francisco at Dallas as I do to a bunch of fourth graders at John Harris Elementary School in Sioux Falls. And it's just amazing to me. It's the same words, it's the same stories, because everybody gets this. It's such a message of simplicity. And it's something that people want to, in this day and age, especially now, people want to feel encouraged, because you turn on the news and it's just a big old downer. And you think people are just rotten. And it's not that people are rotten. There's a lot of greatness going on out there. And I get to hear it from the people who hear me share the story. Now they want to tell me their story. I'm going to just show you. I have received, if you go into the basement of my house, right underneath me, I have probably 30,000 letters that people have sent me. 30,000 letters that people have sent me, a lot of young people, and they'll share what they feel about the book or what I've said on the stage. So yesterday I went to the mailbox and I had 20 letters from the kids at John Harris. I just happened to bring that up, and they write their thank you notes.
Yeah.
It's just precious, and all of a sudden you realize I have connected with a 10-year-old, and I am 68 years old. I never imagined when I started this journey that I would still be able to connect with young people. Yes. And young people, they're still formulating. They're still formulating their values and their ideas, and older people, maybe not so much, but there's still value in the story. Yes. So anyway,
and I found the same thing with young people. I do some work in schools here as an artist in residence, and I hear older people say, "Oh, the kids don't listen to you," or something like that. And I'm thinking, well, I must know some different kids, because once they realize you have something to say, and that you're interested in connecting with them, you almost can't get rid of them, And I have some really funny stories about how kids have come to some event, and their parents are ready to leave, but they're not, and they want to stay, and then they, sometimes it's hilarious that the antics that they go through to spend a little more time talking to you when you have something that they feel is, oh yeah, I want to know that thing, and how about this, or did you ever do that, or how would I do this? It's amazing. They do want to learn, and they are grateful. In fact, I was at a parking lot a couple of days ago, and this teeny bopper starts waving and jumping up and down, hey. And it's a kid that I had in one of the schools, and she had to tell her mother about, oh, he came to our school, and she had all kinds of stories to tell. So I think that there are those, opportunities, let's say, for us older folks to connect with those.
And following that up, that's a beautiful story, and it absolutely comes together with what I'm getting at. I'm going to share a couple of stories. The most beautiful thing about the message that I give, and it's the same title of the book, The Richest Man in Town, is that it appeals to the kids who are on the periphery of life, the kids who don't seem to fit or feel that they don't fit, and it affects them the most. I'm going to give you two examples. In January, I was in a school in northern Iowa. When I walked in the gymnasium, there were probably 300 kids sitting in the gym on the bleachers. But there was a girl with brightly dyed red hair sitting up in the corner. She has purposely removed herself from everyone. And I'm sorry, when I'm being introduced, the superintendent is introducing me, I looked at her and I said, I came for you. I said it not loud, but I just said it, I came for you. And sure enough, when I got done, as what normally happens, the kids come down, especially the kids who really identify, and I could have 50 kids in front of me, and they want to shake my hand, they want to hug, they want to say something. And I got done and I looked up and that girl was running down the bleachers. And she was the second person up to me. And I said to her, you didn't want to be here, did you? You said, no, but I'm glad I came. I said, young lady, you're not going to believe this, but when I leave this town, you're the one I'm going to think about. And what you heard and how it connected with you. But I appreciate you coming up. So that's story number one. Story number two was 2 years ago, I was in the school in South Dakota. And when I got done, and I knew, you could see the kids were kind of, in the beginning, they see me, here's a 68-year-old guy, he's got a suit and tie on, what's he gonna tell me? I'm just gonna phase out of this deal. But I watched them get their body language, they were leaning toward me. And when I got done, because here's the deal, I mean, I'm not talking about a Michael Jordan or whoever that they can't really identify with. I'm talking about a guy who lived in a double wide trailer, 8th grade education, working as a clerk, and he's being celebrated because of what's inside him. And so the kids start connecting with that. When I get done with this school, now I've got a dilemma because there are probably about 15 kids on my left side and 15 kids on my right side. And I knew that the 15 kids to my left, it was the kids that had the stuff. They just had the nice clothing and all that. The kids on my right, not so much. And I had a dilemma. And the dilemma was, who do I turn to first? If I turn to the kids on my left, the kids on my right are going to say, yeah, they always get everything. If I turn to my right, these kids may just walk away. I turn to my right, and young man, probably about 6'1", 6'2", and the first thing out of his mouth was, my dad's been in prison for the last 10 years. Is that that moment I realized I had made the right choice, and all these kids had stories. These kids to my right had stories about the difficulties, and sure enough, the kids on my left, not all of them left, but most of them walked away. But then you drive away from that town or these other places that I've gone to and realize there's no way that you can affect or impact every kid in that audience. And there are kids that you don't know that are just in tune with you. They're just locked onto you. And they're just swallowing every word that you say. And you realize that's what I'm there for. I'm not there for everybody. I'm there for people who need that, positive. Anyway, I get tongue twisted when I think about all those kids because I've met a lot of them. And one more thing I'm going to say about this. I was a legislator in South Dakota for 4 years. I was in South Dakota State Senate. And I told my colleagues behind closed doors often, especially on the transgender issue. I told them so often, I've met more transgender kids than all of you combined ×5. Because when I get done speaking, a lot of these kids will come up to me and I look into their faces and they're scared and about the acceptance and all the other stuff. And I would hug them and they're just looking to be hugged. I am a person. And I know the fact that I have gone out to these schools and had seen all these different kids. And it isn't the days of Leave It to Beaver and Ozzie and Harriet. It's a different group out there. And I became very, very sensitive to the kids who are in schools, especially the kids that are going through difficulties. So.
Yes. I want to open, we're going to come back to this because there's more to cover. I want to open it up to our esteemed panel here, all the folks on. If you have any comments, questions, stories, just open your mic, raise your hand or something, and as they say, speak up. Betty?
Good morning. I would just like to say Well, I just want to say it never was Leave It to Beaver or Ozzie and Harriet. And there were many of us that thought we were the only ones that didn't have that. The other thing is I'm kind of wanting to ask, what do you think is the essence of what you say? Or is it your persona that connects, or a magical combination?
Well, and I appreciate the question, Betty. I do. I believe that the way I share the story, young people especially have that connection because they're going through similar situations. In the last 5 years, I have looked into these audiences, these kids especially, because a third of what I do happens to be children. And I tell them something, and I remember I threw it out the first time, and the reaction I got was striking. And I decided this is always going to stay on. I said, I'm going to tell you something, young people. There's no such thing as a perfect family. There are a lot of really good families. There are a lot of good families. There are a lot of average families. And there are a lot of families that are struggling. And that is a bond that created, I know, between those kids and me, because it's the recognition that I got troubles at home. And I tell them, there are people in the school that want to help you. They just want to help you. They don't want you to be a statistic. They don't want you to drop out. There are people. The reason why teachers decided to be teachers is because they care about young people. You need to be comfortable to go to the people that can help you. So I think it's the idea that I can share a story that they connect with. And that's important, because they have in their own minds, everybody's sitting there in their own minds, have their own stories. And they're feeling that story at the time that I'm talking. And a lot of kids will say, well, he's talking about my situation. So there's that bond. And again, this all happened by accident. I never set out to do any of this. But I remember being in a women's prison in York, Nebraska, 100 inmates there. And the warden had told me that many of the inmates would not get out alive because they were going to die there. The sentences were so long. And I remember thinking, well, I'm going to go in there and going to tell those ladies, this is many years ago, I'm going to tell those ladies stuff that's going to help them. And you know what happened? I was the one who left there changed. They changed me because of what they shared with me when I was done. And it just changes you. These situations change you. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Mhm. Thank you. Anyone else have a question, comment, weather report? Okay, well, let's continue our conversation then. Let's talk about the people. You had talked about some of the kids. What are some of the other kinds of let's say kinds of people that you find that actually show up, and you feel that there's some special connection? Like you say, maybe you're not talking to all of those people, but those that you are talking to, tell us about some of those people.
Well, I'm going to share a story that I share now at the outset of all my talks, and not to kids, but to adult audiences. About 6 years ago, I was in Milwaukee, and I was going to speaking for a national insurance company. And they had a beautiful campus downtown Milwaukee, and I arrived an hour before I was supposed to speak. And I hope that people who are listening to this can absolutely say, yeah, I get it, because I got it. And I arrived an hour before, and I was sitting in the lobby. I was about 100 feet from the door that I have to walk through in order to speak in this auditorium. And right outside the door is a guy shining shoes. Now, we've all passed shoe shine guys in airports or whatever, but you rarely do you ever sit down and watch one work. And so I sat there and watched him, and same thing happened over and over again. Someone would come along, jump up in that chair. The shoe shine guy would start working, buffing up those shoes, and the guy in the chair would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. That shoe shine guy is just going to work. And after 6, 7 minutes, person would jump down, they'd shake hands, walk away, next man up. Same thing. Shoe shine guy's got his head down. The guy in the chair would talk and talk and talk and talk. And so I watched this about a half a dozen times. It's time for me to speak. And I started walking toward that room. And the shoe shine guy turns around, looks at me and says, "I think you need your shoe shine." And so I said, "Sure." I jumped up in that chair. And the first thing I did was I said to him, "What's your name?" And he told me his name was Steve. I said, "Have you been shining shoes long?" And he told me, which led to another question. And for the next 6, 7 minutes, I would ask questions and he would give me answers. And when I got done, I jumped out of that chair. I had the shiniest shoes I've ever had. But I walked into that room incredibly inspired. Because I'm standing in front of a couple hundred of these executives. And the first thing I said, normally I think about what I'm going to say before I say it, because I don't know. I want to make sure it sounds okay and think about it. But now I'm going for broke. And so I said, how many of you people know Steve right outside the door? Steve. 8 people raised their hand. And I said, "You know, the guy shining shoes." Well, everybody raised their hand. Everybody knew that shoe shine guy was sitting around. Didn't know his name was Steve, but the guy shining shoes. I said, "How many of you know that for a period of his life, he was homeless here in Milwaukee, living in his car with his 2 little girls? How many of you know that?" And nobody raised their hand. I said, "How many of you know that he's really proud of the fact that he worked so hard and he put those 2 little girls through college? How many of you know that?" And nobody raised their hand. I said, "How many of you know that he's been so entrepreneurial that he has 2 other shoe shine franchises here in Milwaukee and 1 in Chicago? How many of you know that?" Nobody raised their hand. I said, "You know why I asked him? You know why I know that? Because I asked him to tell me about his life." And he shared. And the point, as I tell the audience, is that there's so many people in our lives who live in the shadows. We see them, but we really don't know them. And it's amazing how your life changes by investing in someone else's life and what develops from all that. And frankly, I look back at my story about Marty, the cashier. A lot of people saw him. They tell me all the time, "I saw the same thing you did." But it's just a reminder to me how our lives are absolutely enriched when we get to know someone. But it takes time and getting past that comfort of actually investing a little bit, asking questions. Because as I tell other audiences, I say, and I apologize, Lawrence, for just going on and on here, and I apologize to the people who are listening, but because I've been around the sun 68 times, and you learn a lot of stuff if you want to, in 68 times around the sun. And I say to audiences, you know what the greatest sin of mankind is? Do you know what the greatest sin? I asked that in college students about 4 years ago, or here in Brookings, and I said, "What's the greatest sin?" And I kept quiet. And finally, after 30 seconds, I wasn't going to talk till someone says something. After 30 seconds, the young guy said, "Murder." I said, "Oh, that's a big sin, murder." You got to think deeper than that. What causes someone to take someone else's life? And there was no answer. And I said, "You can take this to the bank, young people. The greatest sin of humanity is selfishness. Selfishness. You look at the 10 Commandments. They all have their basis in selfishness. You think about all the ills that this world has right now. It doesn't matter where it is. It's selfishness. And just as soon as people start doing a little bit more thinking about we rather than just me, things get better. And so that's kind of the code that I live by. How can I impact we? Because what you learn is that when you lift up someone else, you get lifted up. Because we become so selfish. I want me to be first. You lift up someone else. Oh my, what a ride you get! And that's the ride I'm on. It is. So.
Excellent. I can really identify with the things you're talking about in terms of giving people a chance to talk about themselves and giving people the feeling that you are interested, because I think a lot of people are lonely because sometimes it's because they're selfish, because they only think about themselves, so nobody thinks about them. But sometimes it's because others are selfish and just don't even recognize that they exist. And I find that so many people that I run into they are like walking around invisible. I mean, as far as they know, they walk it with a cloak of invisibility. And whereas sometimes we think of that as a superpower, for many people, it's a curse because nobody seems to care about them. So given an opportunity, like you were saying, it's almost like being in the desert. If you think there's nothing there, but if you lie down for a few minutes, you'll find there's a whole bunch of things there, and they come to visit you. And if you lay long enough, they'll get in your sleeping bag too. So there's a lot of people who need what you gave to the shoe shine guy. You know, the sense that, oh yeah, whatever you're doing. If you're not hurting someone else, it's a thing. Well, if you are hurting someone, it's a thing too, but it's not a good thing. But I think giving people the opportunity to see that they count by just asking them, hey, like, tell me about yourself. What do you like to do? I love to ask that question to kids. And when I'm in the prison, often I will ask guys, what's your specialty? What is the thing that you feel that that you are worthy, and because if you can't tell me, then I'm never going to know, and you're going to feel worthless because you don't know what your worth is. So if you don't have one, come see me and I'll tell you how to find one, or give you some ideas of how to find it. So I really appreciate that insight into like getting to know the shoe shine guy. Tell us about the value that you would bring to an audience listening to you or reading your books. What's the value proposition in exchange for their time?
Okay, given a lot of thought to that, because obviously I wouldn't think very highly of myself. When I started out this whole idea of public speaking, I made the decision that I wasn't going to stand in front of people with a PowerPoint presentation and throw stuff up on a screen and say, you need to remember these 15 things. Well, I can't remember where I parked my car. How can I remember 15 things? And so I knew that if I could get to people on an emotional level, because that's when people make changes, whatever, is through their emotions, not through statistics. And so I know when I go and I speak to an audience, and even some pretty tough people. I said the deal about San Francisco, that was about 10, 12 years ago, where I talked to these doctors. And this goes to what you're saying, Lawrence. This doctor came up to me, I suppose he was in the mid-60s. And he had a patient that he had lost to leukemia. And he was very emotional. And he told me that he had a patient who was in the muffler business. He was a mechanic. He put mufflers. But whenever this mechanic would talk to the doctor, he was always inspirational. He was always upbeat and all that. And the doctor lamented the fact that he'd always wanted to make a sign to put outside that guy's business that said mufflers with a message. Mufflers with a message. And he never did it. And he was really disappointed in himself that he didn't take that extra step. Because that's another thing that I tell people all the time. The difference between exceptional and average is normally one more step. Taking one more step. Doing something. I know this. I've seen it live over and over again. And that's a value that I know. I'll give you another example. And I don't know how much time we got, but I think we have plenty. But I'll give you another one. And I challenge everybody who's listening to this. Back in 1995, when I turned 40 years old, I wrote down 57 things I wanted to do before I left the planet. People call it a goals list. It was a goals list. So often people say, well, I'll see it in obituaries, or people say, oh, that's on my bucket list. Something that I say, can I see your list? They say, oh, I don't have a list. Oh, you have bucket thoughts. A list is completely different. A list is a road map and a constant reminder that I need to do this. In fact, the third thing I wrote down on that list was to write a book. It was 10 years later. But goal number 49 on that list was one Christmas, send out 500 Christmas cards with personal notes in each one. And I put it off for a long time. Yeah, that's a lot. I know it is. But when I was a kid, and some of the listeners are gonna be right with me, my parents would receive Christmas cards from people I didn't know. And this is long before Shutterfly ever came along, filled with pictures. In fact, there were no pictures on a lot of these Christmas cards. It was just a card, and someone would take the time to pen 5, 6 sentences. And I was fascinated with these people I didn't know that lived in distant places. And so I thought, one Christmas, I'd like to send out 500 Christmas cards. Well, I put it off for a long time. And COVID year came along, 2020. Now this is the year. And so from March until October of 2020, I made a list of all the people who had put a brick into my foundation. People that helped make me what I was. And they would be teachers, mentors, former bosses, college professors, people who had done things for me and made a difference. And so on the 1st of October 2020, I stopped at the Redland Arts Center in Watertown, and I bought 500 blank Christmas cards. Of course, there were deer on the front, but they were blank on the inside. And I wrote to each one of these people and told them what they did for me. And on the 3rd of December 2020, I put 503 Christmas cards in the mail. And I cannot tell you what I got back. It's emotional when I think about it. And I got it downstairs. Their responses. It's called my treasure chest. It's in a box. And the first thing these people said back to me was, thank you for remembering me. And in the beginning, I thought, of course I remember you. And then it dawned on me, how did they know? You never told them before. And all of a sudden you're springing it on them now. And the people, a couple of things, 26 of those people have now died since Christmas of 2020. And I'm left with the feeling of no regrets. Because a lot of people, when someone dies unexpectedly, they say, I wish I would have told him this. I wish I would have told her this. I wish. And I didn't have to send the surviving members of the family, this is what Mark did for me. This is what she meant to me. I told them. And here it is 3 years later. People still remind me about the Christmas card that I sent 3 years ago. And that does so much, certainly for them. I get that. But it reminds me that by taking a few minutes of time, because it did, it took me a long time. I would write 10 a day for months. But the elation of finally doing that and lifting these people up and reminding them why they were important in your life. Oh my goodness. So I tell audiences all the time, you want to have a great Christmas this year? Pick out 10 people and tell them why you appreciate them, exactly what they've done for you. Just signing your name. I get Shutterfly. It's easy for people and all the other stuff. But when you sit down and you pour from your heart what someone means to you, oh my, it's a deep connection. So
that is so important. It's so easy to lose sight of how the little things that we do like that makes a difference. We have a program in the prison. It's called Cards of Compassion, and we started that effort as a way to just let people know that they were connected and to show some compassion, with the idea that we wanted to normalize compassion in the prison. And the responses are unbelievable. We've done over 6,000, I think we're in the 7,000s now of those cards that we've given to people. And so if somebody's mother dies, their homie gets shot, they thought they were going to get parole, or they actually got the parole, whatever their joys and sadnesses and horrors are, when we have a kind of a network, and when we hear about that, a card is sent, often anonymously, but it's from the compassionate outreach group or something like that. And we know that it makes it makes a difference, because if you pass by those guys' cell, they will have them pinned up on their bulletin board.
Mhm.
And we've had people who come up and say, I always remember this one guy. He said, I'm over 60 years old. He said that this is the first greeting card I've ever gotten in my life. So I had to come up and see who you guys were. So it's like lots of comments that we got like that let us know that that's probably that small thing. And these are all handmade cards, by the way. We just provide cardstock, and we have a group of guys who make it their business to hand make these cards. And now they've actually turned into works of art, and we are going to actually, they started out just sort of like making whatever picture. Now their guys take the pride in making each one a kind of a work of art. And now we're actually we're planning to publish a book. We're scanning all of them in. Before, we just get them and send them out. Now we're starting to scan them, because we realize how powerful that little thing of just sending a card to somebody who they don't get any cards from anybody. Some of them never get letters. Their families, even the person they went to jail for, in place of that person, that other person committed the crime, they went to jail for that person. And that person doesn't even send them a card, So those kind of little things make a big difference.
Well, Lawrence, just to add on to what you're saying, one of the cards that I sent in 2020 was to a guy who helps me all the time. He works at a store here in Brookings, and he sends me texts when there are specials, and he just remembers you. And so I sent him a card. Mind you, this guy was a single dad. His former wife left him for someone she found earlier in her life, and he's left with kids. So he's raising these kids, and tremendous man. And so I sent him a card. He sends a note back, and he said, "My parents are dead. I have no brothers and sisters, and yours is the only card I'm going to get this year. You didn't give me a card, you gave me a gift." And I told him a couple of months ago when I was at the store that I bring him up, not his name, not where he works, in front of audiences, and the impact his story has on other people. And you know what he did? He hugged me right there in front of all his employees. And it was just a marvelous experience. It is. And this goes back to the idea of lifting people again. And you lift them by getting to those people in the shadows, telling them that they have value in their lives, and their value because they give value to you. So anyway.
But both of us seem to be wordsmiths. So now I'm going to go, like you were saying, go that next step and ask, when you talk to people, can you give us some ideas of the practices that you can suggest to them? Because at least for me, I got to the point that I wasn't satisfied. I recognized that I can give people ideas and tell them, hey, like this will make you happy or something like that, or you could do this, or here's something to look at and something to think about. But many people didn't know how. It's kind of like when you go to church or some other place, and people tell you about controlling your let's say your sexual interest, your sexual drives, but they don't say how. So all you feel is conflicted, because here's your mind telling you, well, if I do this, things will work out. And here's your body saying, if you don't do this, you're going to be miserable all day, And so you're faced with that conflict. So when we talk about kindness, for example, how do we help people, or can you give us just whatever kind of thing you would like to talk about? How do you give them the step to go from thinking about it to doing it,
Okay.
practice.
Let me give you, I'm going to say this and then I'll answer that question. When I was talking to 110 high school seniors in Sioux Falls a few years ago, I talked about the importance of apologizing, the healing aspect of saying I'm sorry. And so what I did, I asked those young people, is there anybody in your life who needs to apologize to you for somebody? If there is, raise your hand. And they all raised their hand. And so then I asked the question, is there anybody in your life that you ought to apologize to? And, one by one, slowly, they all put their hand up. And so I asked the question, well, why don't you do it? And I kept quiet for a little bit because I wanted to hear a response. And one brave young woman raised her hand and said, I know this sounds stupid, but I don't know how.
Yes.
I don't know how.
Yes.
And it didn't sound stupid to me because it took me a few years to figure out how to really apologize. And so I said to this group of 110 seniors, what you do is you look at that person and say, I'm sorry I said that. I'm sorry I did that. And oftentimes we muddy it because people will say, I'm sorry I said that, but I'm sorry I did that, but. And that's not an apology. That's an excuse. And people just want to hear it flat out. Because how are you going to argue when someone says, I'm sorry?
Well, I think, I would like to continue on this theme because that's one that's important. But I think I would think a little different, maybe not differently, but a little under the cover of that person's response to I don't know how. I think that the I don't know how part is the internal struggle that you have to get that thing that and you feel you should do, but it doesn't, somehow it gets stuck in the throat. Somehow your brain, maybe it's a thing about courage, and then one says, well, how do you get courage, But I find that a lot of people they have cognitively, they know, and you don't have to convince them that there's something they should do. But then somehow, there always seems to be something that gets in the way of them doing what they want to do, not just what someone told them they should do.
Yeah. And so, as I say in my talks, because I really focus on graduation and the fact that you're going to get gifts when you graduate, the importance of within the following 2 weeks sending a thank you note, not a text, sitting down and actually writing thank you notes. And I tell them, you don't have to be Shakespeare. You don't have to be Hemingway. You can write one sentence or two sentences. The only thing you have to be is who you are. And because people want it, because in your handwriting, I tell them, we see your heart. And you keep those things. And how good you feel that you've taken the time to acknowledge someone's kindness toward you. Don't lose that moment. Don't lose that moment. And then I tell them, hey, tonight when you go home, and who's ever made you the meal or bought you a meal, you make sure you tell that person, I appreciate it. I really thank you for what you do for me. You may take it for granted. Don't take it for granted anymore. And you'll be surprised. If you show enough gratitude, you're going to get some of your favorite meals more often.
So I just, a question, is anyone else getting a hum or something like that? Anybody getting a hum on their speaker?
I heard it briefly and then it went away just a few moments ago.
Okay, yeah, okay, all right. So I'm not sure where it's coming from, but we're on Zoom. This is going around the world in packets. Okay, so okay, so we're getting near the end of our time today, but if you could leave us, we always try to end at 11:30. Hint, hint. If you could leave us with something that each of us could, let's say, take home, what would be the take home thing?
Well, I'm going to leave you with how I leave my audiences. I have to believe that many of the people who are listening to this are a little bit older, probably, maybe some people in the middle, but this is the deal. I tell everyone, young and old, someone is looking up to you. In someone's eyes, you are their hero. And some have told you, grandma or mom, dad, you're my hero, whatever it is. And what an elevated position to be in. And some will never tell you, but they're watching the way you talk to people, the way you help people, because they want to be just like you. And I was reminded of that when I was in Windham, Minnesota, a few years ago. And a woman, I suppose she was about 60 years of age, came up to me and she said, I want to tell you what happened 3 weeks ago at McDonald's. And she said, I was there ordering food in the back of McDonald's in a little charming box. And my 4-year-old granddaughter was strapped in a child seat right behind me. And as soon as I ordered the food and started driving up to pick up the food, my 4-year-old granddaughter said, we need to pay for the people behind us. And grandma said, I stopped the car, I looked back and I said, why would I pay for the people behind us? And the little girl said back to her, because that's what mommy always does. That's what mommy always does. What do you think grandma thought of her daughter and teaching her granddaughter to think about the person behind? And so that's really keeps me going, Lawrence. It keeps me going down the road to hear these fascinating things from people and then sharing them with other groups and the reaction I get from it, because I can read the people's faces in the audience. And I know that certain stories move them, some to absolute tears and all that. And you realize what a special place you get to be in to watch this in front of you. And that's the value of what I do, is a reminder to people of where they need to be in life and that someone is looking up to them. We want positive and good role models.
You know, I'm going to think too that you give them some options, you know, that just from the things you've been saying here today, there are a lot of things that just haven't occurred to people. Sometimes it's poking them in the eye, but somehow they don't see it, you know. Sometimes the sound is so loud we can't hear it too, you know. And sometimes we just need to be in position and it's just the right time. So one, I want to thank you for just being out there, you know, to bring that to people, because I think that's special work to do that. You know, it is special work to bring people to a point where they can see something in themselves, and just as important, they can start to see something in others. They can see, from seeing the value in themselves, they start to see the value in others. So thank you for that. We have just a little more time. So I almost hesitate to open it up to the audience, because it's just about this time that they ask a deep question that takes a half an hour to answer. They've been warming up. But can you talk to us, just how would people find you, to, you know, to if they wanted to maybe have you to come to speak at wherever, their church or school or business or whatever, how would they come to find you?
Well, the one is the internet. All you have to do is Google my name, speaker, and I'm not going to give you the website address.
It's in the chat anyway.
Right.
Yes.
I saw that. But the company is called lifesgreatmoments.com, Life's Great Moments without an apostrophe. So that's how they can find me. I stopped doing Facebook postings as soon as I got into the legislature, because people want to take nicks out of you. You know, poking,
Yeah,
you know, poking. I just thought, I don't need to do this. I'm trying to do a good thing. And by the way, that my time in the legislature was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life.
yeah.
And all
I'll
I
bet.
wanted to do was try to help. And I'm happy for it. And now I'm back on the road full time and get to go to places that I never thought I'd see.
Yeah, yeah.
And meet people that, oh my goodness. And they tell you stories.
They tell you stories. It's amazing how storytelling is so important. And once we get into telling our story and listening, other people tell us the most fantastic stories. And I often say this to the guys that's behind the wall: you wouldn't be here if you didn't have a story. You know, when we do our writing workshops, I said, they don't let you in here unless you have a story. That's the cost of your room and board in here. Is like, you have to have a story. Otherwise, they don't give you time in here. You know, this is, you know, for you, it's a special place. So I think learning our stories is important. And so thank you for sharing your story. And we want to thank everyone here for coming and being a part of this very interesting and let's say educational time that we spent with VJ Smith. Thank you, VJ.
My pleasure.
We'll see everybody next week, same time, same station.